Hey guys, I'm Tom the Tech Chap, and this is the new OnePlus Nord, aka the OnePlus 8 Lite, and it's their cheapest phone ever at just £379. In fact, if we put it side by side with the OnePlus 8, the 8 Pro, and also last year's 7T, you can see just how relatively cheap this thing is. So what's the catch? Well, compared to its slightly bigger and more expensive brother, the OnePlus 8, the Nord does have a few compromises, the headline one being the processor. In here we get the sort of upper mid-range Snapdragon 765G versus the flagship 865. The RAM and the storage are also a little bit slower, the battery's a bit smaller and it doesn't support wireless charging, the screen's not as bright, there's no Wi-Fi 6, we get a single rather than dual speaker setup, there's no official IP water resistance rating, and we also lose the 2x telephoto lens, although importantly the main camera is the same and uses the same sensor. Plus, of course, the design is a little bit different. The Nord has a slightly smaller 6.44 versus 6.55 inch screen, so it's a tiny bit smaller. And you can also see we have this dual selfie camera cutout as opposed to the single camera on here, so a bit more of the screen is cut out, although the advantage is we do now have a ultra-wide selfie lens, which I'll come back to in a second. And then around the back, you can see with the Nord we have this glossy glass back as opposed to the frosted effect, which I think I do prefer, but this still looks pretty good. I've got it in the blue marble color, it also comes in grey onyx, and you can also see they've shifted the camera module to the side, which is fine, although when you're tapping and using it on a flat surface, it does make the whole phone wobble. So OnePlus have made quite a few cuts to keep the price down on the Nord, but importantly, we're still getting the same 90Hz AMOLED screen, the same software, the same dual SIM and 5G support. Plus, I really do like the addition of that ultra-wide selfie lens, but the headline compromise, I guess, is that processor. But does it really make much of a difference? Well, here's the OnePlus 7T with last year's Snapdragon 855 Plus, then the OnePlus 8 with the latest 865, and then the Nord with that 765G. And in Geekbench 5 at least, you can see it's a fair bit slower. But does that make any difference in the real world? Well, if we jump into a bit of Fortnite, not that I actually play it, I'm more of a Call of Duty kind of guy, but what's interesting straight away is in the graphic settings. The Nord is limited to 45 FPS, the 7T caps at 60, but the OnePlus 8 is the only one with a 90Hz option, although only with low settings. So we're still getting a fairly stable 45 FPS with high settings on the Nord, so it's more than playable, but the jump to 60 is noticeable on the 7T and the 8. But what about Call of Duty Mobile? Well, unlike Fortnite, I'm actually able to run some performance tests using an app called GameBench, which requires USB debugging. But anyway, this is the Nord, and you can see we're jumping between 54 and 60 FPS with high settings. Whereas the OnePlus 8 gives us a steady 60. Maybe the odd drop to 59, but it's clearly smoother. In fact, if we get super nerdy for just a second, this is the Nord on the left and then the OnePlus 8 on the right while running COD. And you can see the difference in median FPS at the top right, and also just how wavy that FPS graph is on the Nord versus the straight line on the 8. So right now you're probably thinking either, well, it's such a tiny difference, who cares really, it's only a couple of frames per second, and just think about that price difference, in which case, the Nord is probably your better bet. But if you're looking at those numbers thinking, well, every frame rate helps, and as more games do start supporting high refresh rates and taking full advantage of the more powerful 865, then, it's gonna be a bigger deal in the future, and I want the best gaming experience possible, then, where is it? Yes, then the 8 is your better bet. Although personally, since I'm not a pro mobile gamer, I think this would be all I need. Now just quickly guys, and I'm sure you're sick to death of hearing about VPN providers, but I do want to tell you about Surfshark VPN, who are very kindly sponsoring this video and offering you guys 85% off and 3 months extra free if you sign up using the link below or entering the code TechChap. Surfshark VPN protects your privacy when you're browsing, so whether you're at home or out and about, with Surfshark you can browse safely, block ads, prevent tracking, and also data theft. And of course also access things in different countries like the US Netflix or the UK's BBC iPlayer. So check out the link below and get 85% and 3 months free and give Surfshark VPN a try. Back to the Nord, and while performance on the whole is solid and I've rarely seen any slowdowns, side by side with the OnePlus 8, which has the 865 and faster UFS 3 storage and DDR5 RAM, in simple tasks it's on par, but loading apps, particularly games, it does fall behind. I'm actually using the higher spec model of the Nord here with 12 gigs of RAM and 256 storage, but personally I'd stick with a cheaper base model with 8 gigs of RAM and 128 storage, unless you really need that extra room since they don't support microSD cards. Whichever one you go for though, I'd still suggest jumping into the developer options. You can unlock it by tapping build number 8 times in the about page, and then scrolling down and changing the animations to 0.5 times. This just helps everything feel a little bit faster. But something I have noticed, having used this for the past couple of weeks, is that it just doesn't get as bright as the OnePlus 8. You can see the 8 here peaks at about 850 nits, which is one of the brightest screens I've seen and makes it easy to use outside, and everything just looks more vibrant. However, as you can see, the Nord tops out about 585 nits, which is good, but side by side with the 8, it is noticeably dimmer. And then there's the fact we get the single speaker. The second one up here is just the earpiece for calls, but as you can hear, when I cover this up, it mutes it almost. So it's a little bit disappointing. You get stereo speakers on the OnePlus 8, so if you are gaming or watching videos on this, then the sound sounds a little bit one-sided. But of course, if you're using a pair of headphones, then it doesn't really matter. Now, don't get me wrong, as much as I'm picking the Nord apart a little bit compared to the more expensive OnePlus 8, the Nord is still a lovely phone to use. I still think OnePlus's Oxygen OS software is my favorite. Together with that 90Hz refresh, it feels just as slick and lightweight as stock Android on a Pixel, but with a few nice extras. There's a bunch of customization options if you want to change the icons, the color scheme, and the font. I really appreciate the different display color options, although I tend to go with the AMOLED wide gamut. And just the fact there's no bloatware, the Google News feed left of the home screen is useful, and I'm a big fan of the alert slider on the side of the phone. We also get an optical fingerprint reader, which is actually positioned quite a bit lower than on the OnePlus 8, as well as face unlocking, which I tend to use most. And then there's the battery life, which I must say is better than I expected. We get a 4115 mAh cell, which is a bit smaller than the 4300 battery in the OnePlus 8, but the less power-hungry chip and the ever so slightly smaller screen, in my experience, makes it last just as long. Depending on your usage, a day and a half is easily possible. Plus, with the Warp Charge 30T tech, it takes about half an hour to get back up to 70%. The Nord also includes OnePlus's new optimized sleep feature, where it will stop charging at about 80% overnight and then fully top up just before you wake up. I found it works well and it should keep the battery healthier for longer. The only downside really is the lack of any wireless charging, which is a little bit disappointing and something that you do get on the OnePlus 8. Now let's talk about this camera, because as you guys know, usually on more budget phones, this is where things start to fall apart a little bit. So on the Nord, we're getting 4 lenses, a main, ultra-wide, depth, and macro. So there's no telephoto lens here. As I say though, the main 48 megapixel lens uses the same Sony IMX586 sensor as the OnePlus 8, which is good to see, although the ultra-wide on the Nord is only half the megapixels. OnePlus had promised an update before the review embargo, but that never came, so we may see some improvements before launch, but as you can see, in good light at least, photo quality with the main lens is pretty impressive. So in daylight, photos look about the same quality as you get with the 8. It's hard to tell them apart, so the camera is decent, but I do have a couple of issues. Firstly, the shutter speed is a bit slow. I tried to take a whole bunch of pictures of this cute dog and only one of them came out reasonably in focus. Also, the macro lens is just terrible. The 2 megapixel quality is bad, colors are muted, and personally, I think OnePlus just added it so they could say it has a quad camera for marketing purposes. The main camera fares better in low light. It doesn't match the likes of the iPhone, Huawei P40 Pro or Pixel, but it's okay. And also Nightscape mode is a bit hit or miss. I still feel I get slightly better shots out of the OnePlus 8 as a whole though. It shares similar camera hardware, but the processing, perhaps due to the weaker ISP in the processor, does lower the overall quality. Around the front, for the first time on a OnePlus, we get 2 selfie cameras, a 32 megapixel main and an 8 megapixel ultra-wide lens. Honestly, my wife and I both really like the selfies you get from this. In fact, OnePluses generally have some of our favorite selfie cameras. It's sharp, colors are natural, and the addition of the ultra-wide lens is a nice bonus. Video tops out at 4K 30 on the back and 4K 60 surprisingly on the front, and at 4K 30 quality is good, as is the stabilization, so no complaints there. So the big question, should you buy the OnePlus Nord? Well, it's not perfect, and it does have some strong competition from the likes of the Poco F2 Pro, the Realme X50, the Moto G 5G, and of course even the expected upcoming Pixel 4a. But for £379, I have to say, I really do like this thing, and if my friends were to ask me right now what phone I'd recommend them, this is going to be near the top of my list. And it's also £220 cheaper than the OnePlus 8, and while this is still obviously a better phone, and I think personally I would probably pay the difference, but I'm more of a pro user, for most people, and also if any of my friends ask me what phone they should buy, I go with the Nord. Alternatively, there is the OnePlus 7T, which is last year's phone, but it is a better phone, it's more powerful, you get slightly higher end specs, although you do miss out on 5G, and it's £100 more than the Nord, so it's kind of like a halfway house between the Nord and the 8. So that is definitely worth considering and something you can still buy on their website. So if you want something that's a little bit better but can't quite stretch to this, then the 7T is definitely worth considering. So I hope you guys found that helpful, and if you do want to see more from me, then make sure you hit that little subscribe button down below, and I'm also kind of getting close to 1 million subscribers, so if you could help me out, that would be awesome. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat. And again, a big thank you to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video. Using the Chrome extension, desktop program, or the phone app, Surfshark lets you browse the web safely and lets you visit international versions of websites, which is super helpful if you're in the UK and want to watch some American Netflix. Click the link below to get 85% off and 3 months free, or use the code TechChap at the checkout. So why not give Surfshark VPN a try?